This is the 23rd of May 2006. We're in Tarragona with Christiane Nord. Christiane, you're noted as a translator, trainer and theorist within the school that's known as Scopus theory. Does that label fit to you? Are you a theorist of Scopus?
Well, in a way, I think I am, although I prefer the term functionalist, because, of course, I'm drawing on Scopus theory, but I'm not really a theorist. Myself, I'm a person who applies the theory, and since I'm applying Scopus theory to translator training, translation teaching, and also to practical translation work, I think I'm a functionalist.
Does that mean you're one of a group of people, or do you see yourself as working off your own bat, in a way?
In a way, yes, probably. Although I would see myself in the same group with, for example, Paul Kussmaul and the late Hans Hönig and others.
Good.
Mm-hmm.
Justa Holz-Mentory or Hans Vermeer?
Hans Vermeer and Justa Holz-Mentory are somewhere in the back of my mind. But as I said, being an applicator, I introduced loyalty into the Scopus concept, and I think that's important for application. Perhaps it's not so important for the general theory, but of course I've learned a lot from both Hans Vermeer and Justa Holz-Mentory.
So let's get down to your basic ideas. What do you mean by loyalty in that sense?
Well, you see, radical functionalism, a radical Scopus theory would allow, as I see it, for any Scopus with a given source text, and the translation would be functional as long as it achieves the Scopus intended by the client,
so
or whoever, the aim, the goal,
yeah,
the intended purpose, say. And since when I'm training young students to be translators in the real world, they can't just pretend they are acting somewhere in the void, but they have to take account of the ideas and concepts of translation prevailing in their respective, in the cultures they're working with. And this is precisely what loyalty does. It is a way of considering what the prospective receivers of the translation might expect of the translation and how they're going to receive it. It does not mean that you always have to do what they expect, but that you have to be aware of it and, if necessary, kind of make them aware that you are doing perhaps a different thing from what they expect you to do.
So loyalty to
people.
norms or to people?
To people. Loyalty is an interpersonal category. I would like to insist on this. It's not loyalty with regard to texts, because our texts are kind of utterances of people, and people have rights, and that's an ethical question, of course. And it's a loyalty towards the client, towards the target text receivers, also towards the source text author, if there is any person, if it's not an anonymous text, so to speak. And of course, the loyalty towards myself as a translator, so I can sleep well at night after doing my translation work.
Would that be your main recommendation when you're training translators now, or Do you emphasize other features as well?
No, of course, I emphasize the functional viewpoint, but
Which means what then?
Which means try and find out, if you don't get an explicit translation brief, try and find out what the client needs, thinks he or she needs, and then try to produce a text that achieves precisely these purposes, the purposes intended by the client, if they are compatible with what you think your ethos, your professional ethics are. And with regard to ethics, I wouldn't like to impose my own ethics on the students, but I make a point of telling them that they should make up their minds where their point of departure is and how far they would go, and that they please make up their minds at the beginning of the month and not at the end of the month, where sometimes ethics turn a little bit more flexible if you don't know how to pay the rent the next month.
Do you think that gives a very conservative approach to translation, or is that a misreading?
No, I don't think that's very conservative. Yeah. I think it's quite modern, because the conservative, as I see it, the conservative approach would be that the source text tells you how it wants to be translated, as my head of department used to put it a long, long, long time ago. I've never heard a source text telling me how it wanted to be translated, and my own experience is that it is sometimes even impossible to produce anything like an equivalent in a target culture, especially when the source and the target cultures are very far apart, or if with the historical text like Bible texts, etc. There is no such thing as an equivalent of the, say, of the addressed audience of St. Paul when he wrote the letter to the Corinthians.
Not even functional equivalent.
Not even functional equivalent, because the audience is so different and has such a different background, knowledge, situation, etc. So even if they could read the text in the original, not being theologians, for example, they would read it in a different way.
Good. I'd like now to go back to where you started off with your work in translation studies. What were you doing, or where were you when you were about 25?
Yeah, that's long
10 years ago.
10 years ago, more or less. Okay, I finished my training at the University of Heidelberg when I was 24. And my teacher then, Katharina Reis, asked me whether I wanted to go into teaching. So I said, oh, how wonderful, and started teaching. So when I was 25, I had about 1 year. I'd been teaching for a year, struggling to find my way in teaching. There was no such thing as translation theory then. And the only thing I could do was imitating the teachers I had liked best. Sometimes, groping for my own way in the in the mist. And it was only until very, very much later that I started to kind of develop my own methodology. And
you remained in the university, the German university system.
Yes, I remained there. I never earned a living translating.
Is that a problem, do you think?
For a teacher?
Yes.
Well, I think it would be a good thing if teachers had both a theoretical and a practical experience of translation. But at the time, it was either get this job or perhaps not find one.
Yeah.
And I love teaching, and even in some moments of my long teaching career when I was very disappointed and thought of giving all this up, and people even offered me a job in a big company to be a translator or even supervisors, and I just thought about it for 2 minutes, and I thought, I don't think I want to be this. I don't think I would be a good supervisor for practical translation, because I'm a teacher by heart and soul, and I think I wouldn't make a good reviser in a company. Although I've done a bit of practical translation work, it's not that I never did this, but always sort of on a side track.
Your academic career has had lots of movements.
Yeah.
From Heidelberg.
Yeah, I stayed.
PhD in Vienna.
No, PhD in Heidelberg, in fact. Heidelberg was the longest stay, and of course, a typical feminine career. I had 2 children. I raised 2 children, and until the little one was about to go to school, I didn't just have any time, and I had no free moment to think about this. I don't think I even was interested. And Katharina Reis used to be very disappointed, because in her mind she had thought I would go straight into academic research, which at the time hardly existed. But she never told me. And we only talked about this very much later, when she said, "Oh, I was so disappointed that you didn't," and then you had 2 children. And I said, "Oh, well, yes, I'm glad I had these children." And afterwards, there was time enough to do all the things I did. I think I had to mature, really. I was very young.
You produced a string of books.
But only afterwards, only later, because the first book came out, the text analysis book came out in 1988. So I had been teaching for 20 years then. So, and it grew out of my teaching, and I think that's important for the evaluation of my work, that it has always been very close to my teaching.
Okay. Do you think that your approach to translation has encountered opposition within academic circles?
Oh, yes, it has. Sure. In Germany more than anywhere else, but this is an old story too. A very old story too. No, but I think in Germany, not only because of this, but also because of the situation of translation studies still in Germany. In Germany, translation had always been part of the philological studies, and future language teachers had to translate in their studies or in their training. So philologists used to say, "What are you doing? What we have been doing for the past 200 years." So translation theory found it very difficult to sort of develop into a discipline, and a recognized discipline of its own, and I'm not sure whether it has in Germany really been recognized in the meantime.
Really?
Really.
You don't think you created the new orthodoxy?
No, no, I don't think I did. Then this, of course, has got something to do with my situation. When I left Heidelberg, I went to Vienna for 1.5 years to teach there, and then I went to Hildesheim for 2 years to teach there. But and then only very late, when I was 53, I got this chair in Magdeburg. And Magdeburg is a university of applied sciences with no right to do PhDs. So this is why I never had doctoral students of my own, and only of my own. I had doctoral students, but always in cooperation with traditional universities, colleagues at traditional universities within Germany or abroad, in Brazil, in Spain, in other countries, no problem. But in Germany, I think the situation is different, and we had so much trouble to cover the posts we can offer at our university. We just require people to have a PhD in something closely related to translation, which might be terminology or something, plus practical experience. And it was ever so hard to find people.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Obvious question then, perhaps. What remains to be done in translation studies? What do you think?
Everything. No. When people ask me this question and say what remains to be done, or what do you think about the present stage of translation studies, I think, judging from the functionalist corner, I think what we need now is an empirical phase to prove or correct the theoretical ideas, to verify or falsify them, and find out how much of this is actually done in practice, not only in literary translation, because there's hardly any functionalism there, but in professional translation of specialized texts in the EU or in companies or by freelancers, etc. So I think we need quite a lot of studies there, and I think the field is open for research. No problem to find research topics here. But this has to be done before anybody starts on some new theoretical idea.
Great. Christiane Nord, thank you very much.
You're welcome.